what I'm going to talk about anyway in a minute is predominantly that interaction between humans and robots. That one of the possible, probable, maybe revolutions coming up will be robots emerging from the shop floor of manufacturing environments into our worlds with us. And if that happens, then if robots start to be with us in our domestic environments, work with us in the workplace, then suddenly the option of us squirrel them away from us where they can't damage us won't be possible anymore. And instead, we'll have to start thinking about how it's going to be safe and how they're going to communicate with us effectively. And that's a big problem. Most of the work we do is with humanoid robots, but we're talking generally about robots that will be, so say, service robots, i.e. working with us and for us. So I'll just backtrack a little bit to where I was going to start here with these slides. So there I am, and there's some chit chat about the mission of the Bristol Robotics Lab, and there's a picture of what used to be Hewlett-Packard Building 1, which I think some of you in this audience can remember as Hewlett-Packard Building 1. Now part of the Bristol Robotics Lab, and there's some other laboratories in there as well, machine vision and others. So there's a picture of the lab going into the distance with nobody in it at the time, because we'd only just moved in there. I think there are about 3 or 4 people there. It's a bit fuller than that now. So why did I want to talk about the rise of the machine? Well, obviously I've taken that as a terrible quote from a Terminator movie, but I couldn't resist it. But why might this revolution be happening? Well, the prime one is this, the profile of the ageing population. In almost everywhere, the demographic is changing, as you probably already know. So they're gradually we're living longer. You know, and I'm now living longer than I should have done, and I'm still living and feel good about it. But there are less and less young people to look after us as we get older, and even if as we carry on to that profile in some countries, even if all of the young children were willing to look after all of the elderly people, there wouldn't be physically enough of them anymore. That's not true in all countries, but it certainly is true in some of them. So there's a very strong motivator to try and find some solution to that problem, and one possibility is robotics. So that's one driver. Another one is flexible manufacturing, and I mean very flexible manufacturing. In other words, if you look at the industrial output of the European Union, and to a certain degree the United States and a lot of the developed countries, there has a tendency for our manufacturing to be low volume, high profit goods. So things that are valuable to people to buy, but we don't make very, very large numbers of them. A lot of that very large scale manufacturing at low profit has gone to the Far East and other parts of the world. Now, if you want to try to increase the probability, the quality of that flexible manufacturing, then one way to do that might be to allow robots to work with humans in those kinds of environments, and that's not possible at the moment because if you look at a small or medium-sized enterprise, an SME, then the cost of automating some production line in which you make 100 of these, and then 100 of those, and 500 of those, then they're all different from each other, is just not feasible. If you had alternatively a robot which you could easily program without being a programming expert to do some task or other, and then it could do those 100 things, and then when it comes to the next 100, you can easily program it again to do something different. Even if it wasn't as good as you, at least it would have the same quality for every one of those 100 it makes, and therefore, and you could leave it running all night doing that. So it might be worthwhile, if you had such robots, having robots that could work with humans, assembling things together. Perhaps there might be some things that the robot could do, and then some really intricate things that a human will always have to do. But then you could hand the thing back to the robot again, that kind of environment. And then I've put other reasons in here because although I'm very reluctant to start us going off down into fantasy land, because this robotics is one of those areas in which, and I'll talk about that in a minute, there is a kind of fantasy in our heads about robotics. Without going into too much depth, I think there is some kind of fascination coming from somewhere that I couldn't exactly define for us to kind of create something. You could say it comes out of monotheistic religions, but you know, the idea of creating something in your own image. You know, I don't want to go there in this talk. We could spend a whole hour talking about it, but there's definitely some fascination we have in building something. If we can't meet an alien intelligence somewhere, we might build one. That'll do. I don't want to go any. I'm not a philosopher, but there's definitely other stuff out, and you can see it from the film industry and the science fiction books that we do have some fascination with this kind of thing. So here's some. What I mostly want to do is romp around, talking about some in this space of the key challenges of what need to be done in order to knock down the walls between robots in their manufacturing cells and us, and have them amongst us being useful. And there are a whole pile of issues here. I'm only going to have time because this is not obviously not that long a talk, and there's a lot of issues. I'm going to mention some of them briefly. Like energy autonomy is number one, I think, in so many ways, but we don't have time to talk about it really in that depth. And some of them I'll talk in a bit more depth. So let me just talk down quickly, and some of these will go into a bit more detail. So energy autonomy, I think that is the kind of elephant in the room. If you imagine a robot other than one which you can plug into a wall socket, how will it stay going for more than 20 minutes before its batteries or whatever other power source it has goes flat and runs down? No idea. We haven't answered that question. We are doing some work in our lab on energy autonomy, trying to create, in some ways, a kind of artificial intestines and guts to consume biomass and produce energy, but I haven't got time to talk about that here. That's another talk. I'll just mention it and we'll carry on. It's not solved. In fact, if you look at the Terminator movies, as far as I can remember, Arnold Schwarzenegger has not one, but 2 nuclear reactors or something similar in his chest. I mean, this is not practical, is it? Could you have an internal combustion engine? I don't think so. Not in your home. You know, it's not going to work, is it? You know, 2-stroke 50cc engine whirring away. The energy density just isn't there in batteries. It hasn't been, it isn't there. It isn't going to be there in the foreseeable future. So how are we going to do this? Don't know. Let's just leave that one. Carry on. Okay. What I'm mostly going to try and give you a feeling here is that the current state of the art, which the laboratory I come from is in many respects an example of that state of the art, is a long, long way away from being there. Okay, there's one example immediately. So what should they look like, and what do we mean by the word robot anyway? And I'll revisit that in a minute. That again is just a sort of open challenge, really, an open thought. Then in a little bit more detail, there's the next 2 examples here about, well, certainly what we're going to need if we're going to have robots that are going to communicate with us in our environments is many more channels of communication than there are there currently. Let's say that the 2 people have gotten together and they've decided to, you know, unpack this IKEA flat pack and they're going to make a desk or whatever it is, they're going to make a table, something like that. I bet you those 2 people could assemble that table, even if they didn't even speak the same language, as long as they knew beforehand that that was what they were trying to do. Even if they couldn't use the voice channel at all because they couldn't understand each other, they could still figure out how to work together to build that table. And they do it by all sorts of other mechanisms of communication. You know, body pose, gestures, gaze, eye gestures as well as body gestures, eye gaze, you know, this is the thing I'm paying attention to at the moment. Noises, guttural noises that are not speech, but, you know, or that, which are pan languages predominantly. We would use all sorts of things. And a robot that's going to communicate with us in our environment would need to be able to understand and generate all of those channels, which is very hard and not solved. We're particularly interested in touch, as it turns out, which is why that one's underlined and in bold there, because that's something, a modality we think has been much underplayed in research so far. Anyway, so we're also going to need to make these things safe and useful, and HRI stands for human-robot interaction, by the way. Which is fairly obvious, bearing in mind what I've just said. You're going to have a robot that's going to be in your environment with you, and it mustn't damage you. I will be a little bit careful here because there may be some people from the countries I'm going to talk about here, but I remember having an interesting discussion with a Korean guy about robot safety. And it took us quite a long time talking for me to realise that he was talking about robot safety from the perspective of the robot being safe from people, which, but I'm not saying, you know, that's a different culture and a different feeling about what you mean by safety, which is also true. I mean, you could imagine that if you had a lot of robots around in society, there might be wholesale vandalism going on. You know, it would be quite good fun to beat up a robot. But I think most people are thinking about yeah, perhaps that's what we should be creating robots for. Who knows? We can certainly get some angst out by going home and kicking the robot a few times. But nonetheless, I think I'm talking here mostly about robots being safe around humans, and they have to be useful and trustworthy. All sorts of difficult issues that need to be addressed. Down the bottom here, easy to teach. In other words, if they're going to be in our environment and we're going to need to teach them how to do things they don't know how to do, you don't want to get out a keyboard and start writing, you know, programs to change it. That ain't going to work. And lastly, again, I'll just mention a couple of things to do with ethics, to do with robots, and then finish the talk, because that's going to be, again, fantasy land if we're not careful. So, what do we mean by a robot anyway? Well, the only comment I really want to make by these images is that robotics is one of those areas, and I'm not sure if there are that many others, but certainly robotics anyway is one of those areas in which everyday ordinary people kind of have two images in their heads, and they kind of believe both of them. And part of it's to do with the media. I.e., we sort of almost believe that robots are these things. I know we know they're not, but we kind of have this kind of image in our heads that a robot could be this thing. But we also kind of think, well, really, a robot is this thing. Well, this, by the way, for some of us will know, is a very old manufacturing robot, one of the first manufacturing robots. So we kind of have this duality in our heads, and then so it means that when we're doing research which is trying to actually move from this world and into this world, we have to be very careful as robotics researchers about what we really claim we can actually do. It's a very hyped subject, robotics. You know, and it gets a lot of media attention, which is good. You know, we had David Willits, whatever he is currently, around our lab last week. One of the ministers. What is he? Minister of? Yeah, I can't remember what he's minister of currently. Universities, the university manager. There we are. So, and he likes coming there, and he enjoyed it. But you know, I'm sure he would only say mature things about the place. But it's clearly a subject which is very you have to be very careful about what you say it is you can actually achieve, or people will think you can achieve stuff you can't. And what do we mean by a robot anyway? Well, there's all sorts of things. Images here. This is clearly a robot. This is one of the humanoid robots out from our lab. There's another robot here which has got whiskers on it. There's a robot here which is meant to be showing something that's travelling down a blood vessel of some sort. We are actually just starting to do some research in this area. Is that a robot? Yes, probably. There's a robot surgery machine. Is that a robot? Probably. Is a car which can be can drive itself around. Is that a robot? Maybe. So there's no hard rules here. We seem to kind of know intuitively whether something's a robot or not, but we don't really know what the hard boundaries are. And again, that's just a thought to put out there and then carry on. What should they look like, robots, anyway? Well, here's a robot which this is us playing around with robot heads.
Hi, I'm Danny Bozzo, an MSc student in Mechanical Engineering at University of Bristol, doing a thesis in Bristol Robotics Lab. I'd like to show you one of the robots we're working on here at BRL, a robot with what we call a hybrid face, one that combines real physical structure with digital 3D animation. Subtle movements and random blinking help to add to the realism of the face, and the robot's mouth synchronizes with an incoming audio stream dynamically in real time to control the mouth movements. We're exploring facial expressions as one means of nonverbal communication between humans and robots.
And what we've done was linked the speech movements of the mouth and the eyes paying attention to things as they moved around in the screen, so that it could make you think it's paying attention to things and form certain expressions. One of the things here, though, to note is that that head doesn't really look that much like a human head. That one, however, does. And although that is a robot head which is kind of much more human-like than the previous one, it's not clear whether, if we were going to have these robots in our homes, do we really want them to look like this? There was a Japanese guy in the 1970s, I can't remember, Mori I think his name was, who proposed something called the uncanny valley, which is the idea that as robots become more and more like us, we'll be happier and happier with them. But then after a while, we won't like it very much. They'll be like us, but not like us, which is definitely the area this robot head is in. This is stuff called frubber, which is a sort of it's silicone with air in it, and it does feel like human flesh, but it's not warm. And of course, there's a lot behind you can pull off the hair at the back, and there's a load of radio-controlled motors that pull tendons around that make it able to smile. And the idea of this experiment is this lady here makes some expressions, and this robot copies those expressions to a certain degree. And it is pretty spooky. You know, it is in that uncanny valley. You think this is real, but not real. So would we even want to do this? I don't know. And that's an open question, really. After all, that robot can make expressions with its face that you can understand, but then so can that one. And we've done experiments with psychologists who have taken both of those two heads and had people interacting with them, and they like that one better than that one. They don't like that one. So maybe robots. There's an argument you can make that robots should be humanoid, and that argument has two threads to it. One thread is the reason they should be humanoid, and this is the more operational one, a more sensible one. They should be humanoid because if they're going to move around and operate in our world that we live in has been created for us to manipulate. You know, so cups are the right size for us to put hands into, buttons are right so fingers can press them, so on and so forth. So door handles are at a certain height, which are the right height for us. So it makes sense for a robot to be humanoid so that it can interact in the world in the same way as we do. The slightly more less certain one is a psychological one. Would we trust robots that don't look, or are we more likely to trust them if they look like us and act in the world with us in the same way? You know, a robot with 8 arms or something, would we find that spooky? Even though it could make a cup of tea and at the same time do the washing up and all that stuff, would we like that? Who knows? All these things are in their infancy. So that's probably not worth showing you without a video either, because I don't suppose that one works either. But what this robot does, this is a robot arm here. You just about see there. It's just this part of a humanoid torso, and what we've done is make it think that it has the weight distribution and power distribution of a human arm, even though it doesn't. So it's got all the same joints, but the thing is that the mass is much more distributed out towards the end. So its version of an optimal movement ends up not looking humanoid, because most of our own movements are smooth and energy minimized. You know, we've just, over evolution, that's what we've learnt to be like, if you like. Most of our movements are energy minimized. So, but we might not like a humanoid shaped robot which then doesn't move the same way we move. For example, if this video was working, you'd see it would do this, which is what we do when we're reaching up. We bring the elbow in, move this up, and then reach out. Whereas that robot would actually have to do that to minimise its, which doesn't look very good.
First project I want to tell you about is called Ecopath. It is a small mobile robot that uses special fuel cells with microbes in that can process things to generate energy. It can process insects and fruit to provide enough power to move around. Normally, mobile robots use batteries to power them, but these batteries need to be recharged so that the robot can keep going. The idea of Ecobot is that it can recharge itself.
That's probably enough of that. So what we were trying to do there is understand how to make humanoid robot gestures kind of look okay. You can understand what they are, that they are these gestures, and code them correctly with the speech content. So the robots, the gestures were not programmed in the sense that they were created spontaneously as the speech content was rolled out, which is pretty much how we do it, according to neuroscientists. So in other words, we think about what we're going to say, and then as we say it, the gestures kind of appear. And that's how that robot was operating. It wasn't actually thinking about what the gestures would be beforehand. As the speech unrolled, it would start making the gestures. And rated against a human saying the same dialogue and its gestures, it rated very well, about the same. So it's certainly true that we could understand how to make a robot gesture in a way that's understandable, in the same kind of way that I'm gesturing. A lot of those, by the way, are beat gestures. I say this is the important word in this sentence, you know. But there are also pointing gestures you've noticed, and size gestures, iconic gestures, as they say, going on there as well. So back to these key challenges. So multi-channel signalling and safety. So, but look, we don't think that the state of haptics research, I touch, is as advanced as it should be. There's been and there is continuing to be a lot of research on vision, but it's not really at the stage. The sense of neither is vision at the state is in the state that it should be, but nor is the sense of touch. The robot you just saw gesturing around has no sense of touch at all. It knows where its body parts are, but it doesn't know the fact that it's contacted anything. This is us making a quite nice, sensitive, fingertip-sized touch sensor, which is optic actually. It looks down at the bottom of a load of dots painted on the inside of here, so that as you touch on things, this is a camera looking down like onto there, and as you push things into it, you'd see these move around, and you could see therefore that things were happening. Those are about a 1 millimeter pitch, which is closer together than the sensory neurons in my finger, which are about 1.2 millimeter pitch. Because I think this is a cool experiment, this one. This is an experiment of something that was done at MIT a few years ago, actually, but with a real caricature face. And the idea here is that, so what kind of HRI should we even try to achieve? So what sort of human-robot interaction should we even try for? And here we were just doing a little kind of play experiment, if you like, of trying to fool a person into thinking that the robot is understanding what you're talking about, whilst actually not understanding any of it.
Okay. Hello, Bert. I'd just like to talk to you about the project I've been working on. It's all about using non-verbal gestures and utterances, and we use these to try and convince someone talking to a robot that it is listening and understanding what they say. You getting this so far? Okay, good.
What it does is blink and nod and say or at you, and when someone starts talking to it, every single person that we've asked is fooled into thinking that the robot understands at least some part of what the human is saying, and all it's actually doing is it's making small random movements, and every time there's a pause in the speech content, it says or nods, or blinks or looks around. And it's amazing how strong that is and I was mentioning that some of us in our homes could have some of this to just kind of pass the time, really. You know, I mean, let's face it, I think some of us have done that kind of thing before when listening to our partners. Because I've never done that, but I think some people probably have done that, and it is quite amazingly impressive. Just it's not understanding a word. Anyway, so what sort of HR? How complex does the HR really need to be? Because this seems to do fine for many situations, not understanding anything. Okay, so let's get on to the safety and usefulness side of things. So whether they should look like this, I don't know. Does a robot need to look like this? I I don't know. We've made a fairly close approximation to a humanoid form for the reasons I'd mentioned before, without being too scary. This thing, unfortunately, we wanted this robot to be able to move around at about the same speed as a human can. So when it's gesturing, it can gesture, as you saw with the previous version, which was a Mark 1 of this. This is a Mark 2 of the same robot. We want it to be able to move around at the same sort of speed that a human can. And if you want to do that, you end up going up a sort of ratchet of power and mass, such that the thing ends up being about 3 times the mass of a human, and therefore about 3 times the power of a human in order to move around at the same sort of speed that we do. So it's pretty dangerous. It is an Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, I can imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger is 3 times as powerful as me, easily. So, you know, if it thwacked you one, not just because it's made out of hard material, because it's so powerful, it would be very dangerous. So this thing's actually got force control at every joint, and there's a lot of effort into trying to make it safe so that it knows that it's hit something, and therefore won't do too much damage. But it also needs to be, physically safe in the way that it'll minimise damage if it hits something. But the more important and harder challenge is to make it behaviourally safe. In other words, can it understand enough about what you're trying to do together in close proximity to understand what it should do and therefore what it should not do, so as to do the right. So, for example, if you gave this robot the task of, you know, putting these glasses into a box, you would expect to be able to walk around behind it, and not to suddenly flail out from behind it and hit you. So that's a kind of context-sensitive safety. So it's called Bert, this robot. Here he is doing some gaze tracking. So what you can do is you can look at the person's eyes and figure out where they're looking. So as he's moving this around, these vectors are moving. There's not really things sticking out of this person's face, by the way, out of their eyes. What he's doing is shining infrared light at the person's eyes, and then there's corneal reflections coming back, and depending on where those reflections are going, it can figure out where the human is looking. So in other words, this robot, using these cameras on the side here that are doing the gaze tracking, this robot can figure out where the person over here just out of sight is looking. And shared attention is really important. You know, I'm looking all the time to see if you're not asleep and paying attention to me because you're looking at me or somewhere in my area. We find it's a very important message, shared attention. And he can also move his own eyes around so as to track something. So in a minute, I think the human's going to walk past. This seems like it's trivial, but it turns out, like I say, to be rather important. One of the things actually that this robot is not doing, which is a lot more, which we only learned by doing this, is more important than we realised, is it's not blinking. And blinking is a really strong subliminal message to us of, or the lack of it, of death. If you think about films and TV programmes where you finally decide the actor playing the person is dead, it's part of it. Obviously they're not moving, their bodies aren't moving, but they stop blinking. And we didn't realise why this was looking spooky to people until we realised that actually it's because it wasn't blinking. These seem like trivial things, but they're actually rather important. Here's a robot trying to pass an object to somebody. And as it passes it, it's looking for visual attention from the human all the time as well, to see if the human's actually watching the operation that's going on. So he's looking to see if this human's looking at this object, and he won't let it go unless the person's A, looking at the object, and B, starts to pull on it. So we'll move on, I think. Otherwise we're going to take too long. This one is to do with verbal communication.
Going to prepare ring. What would you like me to do?
Grab.
That was grab, I think you said.
What would you like me to do?
Show.
Showing you the ring. What would you like me to do?
Give.
Going to serve the drink.
I'm going to serve the drink because it thinks it's got a drink in its hand.
What
We
would
know
you
it's
like
not a
me to
drink.
do?
Hand over.
What would you like me to do?
That's enough of that again, I think. But one thing point I want to make there is we've got a very long way to go there, haven't we, in terms of social interaction? You'd be pretty bored pretty quickly talking to that robot, wouldn't you? And you probably want to kick it, actually. Perhaps the Korean guy had the right idea. We need to be able to teach robots easily, as I mentioned earlier, because it's no good being able to have to pre-program them. We don't want to have to do that. This is another robot. This robot's called ICub. It's an Italian robot. This guy here is from the Italian Institute of Technology, who are close collaborators of ours, and they created this ICub. That's a sort of a humanoid robot on a scale of about a 7-year-old, something like that. I'm not sure why they wanted to make it a 7-year-old. I don't know. Possibly because it wouldn't look too scary. I don't know. But what's going on here is that the ICub is going to learn about objects. So it's quite amusing. Not sure how loud it is. That's right.
I do not know the subject. What is it?
This is an octopus.
Who I see? What should I do?
Where is the purple car?
What should I do?
Where is the purple car?
I have not found any purple car. Is it so?
No, here it is.
Who I see? What should I do?
Where is the purple car?
I think this is the purple car.
Pretty complicated concept though, wasn't it?
Am I right?
Yes, you are.
Cool. What should I do?
Push the octopus.
Okay, I will push the octopus.
So, well, I mean, this is where it's at. This is the state of the art. I mean, there's some quite complicated stuff going on there. Although this guy ICub had already been told about the octopus, he hadn't been told about the purple car. So that was learning about the fact that a purple car, it has these visual characteristics. And in fact, you can then build the fact that the robot knows about objects that have certain characteristics. You can then build sequences of what to do with them. And I'll just show you the next slide because I think this is also quite funny, really. So this is teaching it basic actions rather than objects.
Let me show you how to reach the purple car with your right hand.
Do you mean show me how to reach the purple car with my right arm?
Yes, I did.
Okay, now teach me the correct position.
Finish.
Thanks for the help. What should I do?
Take the purple car.
Okay, I will take the purple car.
There's a bit, the kinematics is a bit wrong. Never mind.
What should I do?
I will teach you an object.
Great. Show me the new toy.
There you go.
I'm not sure if you need
I
to
will
do
learn
this
a
or
new
not.
object. Could you spell the new word for me?
T-O-G.
Did you say does?
No, I did not.
Could you spell the new word for me?
You could hear by that guy's voice how often he's done that kind of.
Did you say dog?
Yes, I did.
Thanks, now I can use the word dog. Alright. Now I know what a dog is. What should I do?
Where is the dog?
I think this is the dog.
Yeah. And that's enough of that. So that's it, that's where we are, that's the state of the art pretty much. I mean, there may be variants on it, but so robots are not thrilling partners at the moment, that's got to be said. There's a lot more to be done. For example, when we speak to each other, we use what are called indexicals a lot, so we'll say, oh, pick that up. We don't actually say what it is we want to pick up. It's in the context of the other signalling mechanisms that we're using. You would understand that you're supposed to pick up the mouse because I was pointing or looking at the mouse when I said pick that up. And that's, again, hugely difficult to do. We find it effortless. Just because I've gone a bit too long, so I'll just flip through other things. In this video, we look at the fact that Sergey here, the experimenter, looks away in the middle of Bert trying to give him this table leg. That's a table leg, by the way. There's a tabletop somewhere. And the task that was being executed here was putting these table legs onto the tabletop to make basically a model of an IKEA tabletop assembly operation. And halfway through giving this leg to Sergey, he suddenly looks away. So the gaze tracking software says, "Oh, hold on a minute, I better stop here. I can't. Well, I need some advice. What do I do now?" In fact, this project in which we were looking at both physical safety and behavioural safety, but also actually how to form shared plans. So there's some idea that we're going to build this table together, and these are the bits of the task that I need to do as the robot. These are the bits that the human needs to do in their part as the human, and together we'll achieve some overall task, which is in this case to put those two legs and another two legs that you can't see in that picture onto the top of the tabletop, so as to make the table. And what's quite hard there is the idea that something, again, we handle very easily, which is the idea that although you've agreed this plan, and let's say the plan is that the human will hold the tabletop and then ask for the table legs from the robot, and as the table legs are given to the human will put them onto the table. That's what the shared parts of the task are, which builds the table. If the human then suddenly, in the middle of all that, even though he is supposed to be holding the tabletop and being given the table legs, suddenly reaches out and tries to get one of the table legs, we would take that effortlessly in our strides. But a robot thinks, "Oh no, what do I do now? The shared plan is broken. How do I proceed?" And at the moment, Bert gets very upset actually, and he thinks, "Oh no!" But luckily, what he's got a model of what he's supposed to do in what he thinks the shared part of the shared plan is. He's got a model of what the human should do, and he's got a model of what he thinks the human thinks the robot should do. All right, keep with us for a minute. So if he's got both of those, so he's got his own plan, what he thinks he's supposed to do, and he's got a plan of what he thinks the human thinks he should do, when they diverge from each other, because the human suddenly did a bit of the plan that he thought was his, he can think, "Oh, hold on a minute, something's gone wrong. I need to negotiate with the human about whether I should carry on, or are we now finished, or should we rearrange the plan so that now I don't give you the table logs anymore and I do something else." This is all stuff that we take it effortlessly in our strides, but we're struggling with all this stuff right now, and that is the state of the art. Anyway, lots to be done. So just a taster of ethics, and again, this is out into science fiction, so I don't want to spend too long on this because I don't want to give you an impression that these are pressing concerns. Well, some of them are pressing concerns, and I'm not going to express any opinions about the first two because it would be unwise for me to do so. But just to say that there are ethical considerations to do with robots being used for military purposes, and I'll just allude to what the danger has been said that it could be. in its most extreme case, and that could be this. In the very wealthy nations, and we don't think we are one of the wealthy nations. What is the... I'm just paraphrasing here, okay? It's not necessarily what I believe, although it might be. What's the real cost of a war? It's the body bags coming back to your own country. That if you think that is the real cost of war, i.e. your own people coming back dead in body bags, if you had robots on your side, you didn't have any people there, you could go and kill as many people as you liked. I don't know if that's true or not. Well, I have my own opinion, but I'm not going to express it now. That's an ethical issue. What should we do about that? Another more close to home ethical issue is, should we even really be using some artificial device that is looking after a little old lady or a little old man like me when I'm in a year or two from now when I'm old? It won't just be helping to, you know, make a cup of tea and helping them to wash and doing other things. It may well be replacing some human companionship, and is that right? Don't know, maybe not. It's certainly difficult to think about. And then on the other side of it, there's more like the Korean thing I was talking about earlier. There's the ethics of the robots themselves. If we really were able to build robots that were intelligent enough to be useful in interacting in very close collaborative relationships with humans, would they have rights themselves? Are we creating a slave class? Don't know. Okay. On that note, I will stop. Thank you.